So yes, I am broaching a very hot potato topic here, and I'm going to explain why I believe Abby from The Last of Us Part 2 is trans. Now I'll start this off by just saying I have no problem if you identify as trans. I have no problem with trans people existing. And also I have no problem if you question the validity of trans being a thing. It's nothing to do with me. It's a very divisive subject online, but it doesn't affect me either way. And ultimately, it's my belief that, as with a lot of things today in online debate and politics and the media, I think people on the extreme sides of both arguments are nothing but tools to keep people divided in the grand scheme of things. That said, it's my personal view that I've always accepted trans as being a thing in the same way that I believe gay people are born gay and, you know, furries are born furries or whatever. But it just doesn't impact my life whatsoever, so I don't care. Anyway, we'll move on. And I say that to explain that when I first played The Last of Us 2, and I was a massive fan of the first game, I was hugely excited for the second game. And already I knew from the very first reveal trailer, I knew that Joel was going to die. That was just something I knew, 100%. It was just blatantly obvious from that teaser trailer, where Joel's just blurred out the entire time, and then what Abby says at the end of that trailer. So I wasn't expecting Joel to die, but definitely not in the way it went down. But also with the leaks that came out, I did go in hearing that there was a trans character in the game. So yeah, that's how I went into the game anyway. But straight away, Abby to me was trans, and I accepted her as trans, and that's just the way it was for the entirety of that game, and nothing swayed me from that thought whatsoever. And it wasn't like a conscious thing where I was constantly looking for it. It just was. Abby was trans. That's how I saw her through the game, and that's how I played the game. So, colour me shocked when, after finishing that game and talking to people and seeing the debate online, there's some people who didn't think she was trans at all, thought she was just a woman. Thought she was a woman. And I've even seen like debates online where people vehemently expressed that Abby's not trans at all, and it never was a thing, and it was just people being coloured by the leaks prior to launch, and that's what swayed people's thoughts. But even then, seeing that, I was so confused, and I've still had debates with people where they're like, no, she's definitely not trans. I'm like, yes, she clearly is trans. And obviously that's why I think some of the hate was directed to a character because of people believing that, but also because of, what she did. And obviously trans people are probably some of the most, dismissed, disliked people out there, from what I see online. And as an aside, I did know somebody who was just a truly awful person, and what I later understood to be a covert narcissist who was incredibly transphobic, to add to the litany list of phobias this person had. But in a moment of clarity and honesty, when it really occurred, he would admit to watching trans porn, which is an interesting bit of human psychology there. Particularly when you look at like how, some people are like violently homophobic, but then you question like what's going on in their mind and why are they that way. But I digress. So I've even replayed The Last of Us Part 2, and again I come out of that game unchanged in my belief that Abby's trans. And not only that she's trans, but I thought that it was a clear intention that that's what the devs were going for. And well, obviously there is a trans character they openly accept, and that's Lev. So surely that's where my argument falls down, because they openly talk about Lev being trans and they accept Lev, but they never refer to Abby as trans. Well, I'm going to explain why I think this is the case. And you see, now more than ever in modern entertainment, in films, TV, games, the decision making in the characters and the actors we see on screen is more conscious now than it has ever been in history. I'm sure you know what I mean when you're watching an advert and it just clearly seems like every box is being ticked, or you're watching a movie and the same thing happens. For example, on other ways it happens as well, where I was recently excited for the new season of True Detective, partly because Jodie Foster was in it. I think she's a brilliant actress. Yet within 5 minutes of that open episode, I realised it was quite clear that white men weren't welcome there. And this is the thing that's just been glaringly obvious for the past decade, where it seems more and more, it seems rarer that I can watch a TV show or a film or play a game where there's not a point where I'm immediately supplanted from the escapism I crave because of some brainwashed college graduate wishing to virtue signal to feed their own ego, or just outright demonize a certain type of person for their gender or ethnicity. I think you know what I'm talking about. And it's clear to me, listen, Naughty Dog still have huge respect for them, but it's clear to me that they subscribe to this modern liberal way of thinking. And I should say that I believe myself to be a classic liberal. It's just unfortunate, I think the goalposts have been shifted now, so where the left is just in this weird space now where representation of it's just forced or just poorly executed. Like, for example, when you look at the absolute bonfire that was the recent Star Wars trilogy, and you look at some of the decisions that went into that, and just one of them, when you look at John Boyega's inclusion into the Star Wars trilogy, and like, fine actor, you know, but it was clear that the producers, all they did was, as far as they did with his character, was basically imagine a stormtrooper takes off his helmet and it's a black guy, and that's basically as much as they did with it. And even John Boyega's come out after that trilogy's ended and said, yeah, they didn't do anything with my character. They show no respect to him as an actor whatsoever. It was just producers ticking a box and feeding their own ego. It's disgraceful, really. But on rare occasion, you do get examples of representation done correctly and done well. And one of those was the recent series Shogun, which is absolutely fantastic. Which, while based off of a work of fiction, and they stay true to that work of fiction, which again is another rarity in adaptations, they authentically represented a culture from history, and taught me something of value, while at the same time never detracting from the story and the characters. And it was even handed in its positive and negative traits of the characters and the cultures involved, and the sheer craft and complexity of dealing with race relations was exemplary, and I highly recommend it, and it was genuinely funny in places as well. Anyway, so what I'm saying is, it isn't a stretch to suggest the writers of The Last of Us 2, Part 2, wish to include a trans character in Abby. And what I'm going to explain is my belief that Abby was always intended to be trans, and there was a well-meaning reason behind that by the creators. But ultimately, the backlash towards the character, which I think was exacerbated by the leaks prior to launch, kind of pushed Naughty Dog away from confirming she is trans. Let's look at the evidence, what I'm talking about. So, first of all, as I've explained, in the modern era, casting decisions are so specific and thought out, and the model who provided Abby's likeness is trans. So that's a very specific casting decision. Secondly, obviously we see Abby at a younger age, she's a teenager. But Abby's father was a doctor, part of the Fireflies, who I believe is pretty obvious are a left-wing organisation, in the same way that the WLF is. And I'm saying that to say that he would have grown up as a liberal who would have been accepting of his child's decision to transition, and probably would have encouraged it and did everything he could to see it through. So that's number two. The Last of Us is a world where humans are depicted anatomically correct, and I say that to say that Abby's physique in the game is that of a biological male. Throughout the game, there's numerous references Abby makes, quite subtle ones, that she makes to not being a woman. And one of these is, for example, when she's out with Manny and Mel, and she holds the door for Manny, but he says ladies first, and she declines the offer and replies jokingly, "I'm not a lady," or "I never was a lady," something like that. And another example is when she's with Lev and she goes through Lev's experience, and Abby obviously grew up in a world where she was accepted, and Lev grew up in a world where she wasn't because of religious idolatry. And ultimately, as they grow closer, she tells Lev, "You're my kind of people," which I believe is another subtle hint. And finally, we have the sex scene, which again is, as I've explained, everything is very deliberate in this story, in the delivery of the story and in its execution. And it very specifically shows Abby, how do I say this, being penetrated from behind. Need I say more? So, you see, the intention of Abby's character and the reason why they did this, and I mean in terms of the arc and the way she was intended to play out for audiences by the writers, was that she starts the game doing the worst thing imaginable by killing a beloved character in Joel. And you, as the invested audience who played the first game and you grew to love this character and his relationship with Ellie, are supposed to hate her. That was absolutely supposed to happen at the start of the game, and you want to go on his vengeance missions as Ellie and take out Abby, who unjustly snuffed out this man who meant so much to the audience, because that's as much as we know at the start of the game. Over the course of the game, you get to know Abby, you learn the reasons behind why she killed Joel, why she did it in that way, seeing what she lost herself, and obviously later on not only what Joel did to her, but what now you as Ellie have done to her as well in terms of her friends. And the design by the writer was that ultimately you would come to empathise with Abby and forgive Abby by the end, as Ellie does, and perhaps even celebrate the character in her own right. And as with the meta of Abby being a trans person, people are often dismissed, disregarded, and hated at face value. The intention of the writers was to show that once you got to know this person, the person behind the label, you would ultimately come to, again, empathise and appreciate and ultimately accept her. But obviously, this did not happen. And I remember at the time, and I've seen the online debates where people have claimed that the writers were irresponsible for making a trans character so hated. So obviously I'm not the only one who believes Abby's trans. And obviously, given the sheer veracity, the backlash, and the perhaps unintentional harm in confirming Abby is in fact trans, which would only bring more ire to that group of people, Naughty Dog and the writers have simply decided to stay quiet on the matter and only refer to Abby as a woman, which by the liberal code of, if you identify as a woman, you are a woman. That's their prerogative. But I think that's kind of a get-out clause of not committing to anything which could draw more ire, which I understand. Now, I'm not meaning this video as a way of outing Abby or reinforcing anyone's hatred of her or trans people. I'm merely explaining what I believe the writers are attempting to do, and their reasoning for what I suggest is backing away from that initial will and desire. And I'm not even trying to justify the choices for Abby or The Last of Us 2. I'm just simply hoping to extend the conversation and debate. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm off base? I've been giving you pause to consider. Now, with regards to the story of The Last of Us Part 2, and given my understanding what the devs went for after deciding to kill off Joel so early in the game and delivering on the theme of hate, I did see the clip of Troy Baker in that documentary saying that as much as he struggled with the decision, he ultimately came to accept it, and states that the story couldn't have been told better. Well, I'm not so sure about that. And even though with the TV series, Craig Mazin has stated that they aren't changing much for the second season of the show, I am intrigued by how they handled the story, because I believe there is a better way of doing it. The first thing would be by giving that second game 2 seasons, because it is huge and there's a lot in that game. And I don't know, maybe I'll make another video in which I state how I personally would handle the story. And I don't know, let me know what you think, guys. But anyway, that's my my video where I decided to juggle one of the most heatedly debated political things online, but there it is. If you like, if you dislike, hit the dislike, but leave a comment if you have anything to say. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.